You're on a yacht in the south of France and get lost at sea. Your phone has no signal, and the GPS stops working. There's no way you could swim to safety. Your chances of surviving are pretty much zero. Today's story is kinda like that, but swap the sunny vibes for the Côte d'Azur for the freezing winds of Antarctica. And instead of calm blue waters, picture a sea packed with towering ice as far as you can see. Oh, and forget about phones or GPS. Those didn't even exist back then. So yeah, getting through something like that is basically impossible. But for the crew aboard the Endurance, this wasn't just some what-if scenario. It was real life. And yet, they survived by leaving their ship behind. Fast forward more than 100 years, and scientists finally found their vessel deep in the ocean. Now, new 3D images are helping us bring one of the greatest real-life survival stories to life. Alright, from the top. Back in 1914, the Anglo-Irish explorer Ernest Shackleton pulled together 26 men for the boldest adventure of their lives, to cross Antarctica. We're talking about the toughest places on Earth, a frozen wasteland with brutal winds, long dark nights, and freezing temperatures that can drop below minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit. But for the crew of the Endurance, getting there just sounded like a good time. So, on August 8, 1914, they set sail on their maiden voyage. And by October of that same year, they made it to South Georgia Island. From there, they'd finally head toward their main goal, the Weddell Sea, on the coast of Antarctica. This place is known for its brutal winds, thick sea ice, and freezing waters. Yep, not exactly the coziest place to be. Only 2 days after they left South Georgia, the Endurance ran into a bunch of thick ice, and they started moving super slowly. Thick slabs of ice locked around the ship like a slow, silent trap. At first, the crew waited. Maybe the ice would break up. Maybe the ship could push through. But days passed, then weeks, then months. The ship was stuck, completely wedged into the frozen sea, unable to move. It was February. A small patch of open water suddenly appeared a little way ahead of the Endurance. There was hope, but getting there wouldn't be easy. The ship was still surrounded by solid ice, completely blocking the way. Some of it was nearly 18 feet thick. The crew worked hard all day, cutting a narrow channel through the ice. The next day, they tried again. They even used ropes to pull away huge chunks of ice, each one weighing around 20 tons. But the space they cleared was too small for the ship to build up enough speed. And to make matters worse, the ice was already starting to freeze over again. At some point, the captain decided they needed to stop. More months went by, and the ship was totally trapped. They even saw some cracks in the ice here and there, but nothing could actually help them. And then, things got worse. The pressure from the ice wasn't just holding the ship anymore, it was crushing it. You could hear the timbers groan and the hull creak. Bit by bit, the ship started to break apart. Then in October, a year later, Shackleton had made the call. Abandon ship. And he was right, because in November, the Endurance gave in to the pressure. The front masts collapsed as the bow was crushed. A few days later, the stern was lifted out of the ice, and then the whole wreck dropped into the ocean. And just like that, the Endurance was gone, buried beneath the ice. Okay, but what happened to the crew? The men grabbed whatever they could and set up camp right on the ice, stranded in a world of nothing but white in every direction. No radio, no help coming, and no way to know how long the ice would hold. For months they drifted with the frozen sea, camping on moving slabs of ice, always alert. Eventually, they climbed into small wooden lifeboats and started rowing through freezing waters, dodging towering icebergs, battling waves that soaked them to the bone. It was exhausting, freezing, terrifying, but they kept going. Finally, they landed on an isolated rocky stretch of land called Elephant Island. Their first solid ground in over a year, but it was uninhabited and offered no real chance of rescue. So Shackleton picked 5 men, loaded up the strongest lifeboat, and set across 800 miles of open ocean to try and get help. The journey took over 2 weeks, and they faced everything that could drive any man to madness. Storms, freezing spray, and waves the size of small buildings. But Shackleton kept his positivity. Losing his men wasn't an option. Thanks to his amazing leadership, they managed to reach land. They landed on South Georgia Island, but on the opposite side from where they needed to be. That meant they still had to trek for 36 hours across the island to finally reach the whaling station on the other side. Thankfully, they made it. If you were in their position, you'd probably take a hot shower and curl up in a fetal position for a couple of months. But that wasn't an option for Shackleton. He didn't rest. Instead, he immediately started working on a plan to get the 22 men who were still stuck on Elephant Island. After several failed rescue attempts, the authorities finally lent Shackleton a tugboat. That's a type of boat that moves other vessels by pushing or pulling them. When they were approaching Elephant Island on August 30th, 1916, the captain saw something. A smoke signal coming from the shore. Yep, against all odds, everyone survived. As you already know, the ship didn't make it. It completely vanished until 2022, when it was finally located on the seafloor, at a depth of roughly 10,000 feet in the Weddell Sea. It made headlines around the world, and the footage of the Endurance showed that it was beautifully preserved in icy waters. Its timbers looked brand new, and its basic structure was still intact. The wreck was covered by sponges, sea anemones, sea lilies, and starfish. It was all amazingly eerie. But how's it in such good shape? Even though it looked like any other ship of its size, it wasn't. The Endurance was built to survive tough ice conditions. Every detail was planned for maximum durability. The joints and fittings were cross-braced for strength. It was made of thick oak and Norwegian fir planks and covered in greenheart, which is a really strong wood. The bow was built to face the ice directly. Each piece of timber came from a single oak tree, shaped to match the curve of the ship. That's what helped them survive in the ice for so long. At the end of 2024, specialists did the first 3D scan of the ship. They used underwater robots to map the wreck from every angle, taking thousands of photos. These were then stitched together to create a digital twin, and now you can check it out online. Forget about getting close to the wreck, though. I mean, Antarctica is still one of the most remote places on Earth, so just getting there could be a huge challenge. As the world warms and the ice in the polar south continues to melt, specialists think there will be more chances to access the wreck, but they want to keep it protected. There's even been talk about how to preserve the Endurance. One idea is getting cruise ship owners to agree not to go anywhere near the wreck. So yeah, it's probably safe to say that people in general will probably never get to visit it up close. At least, not in the near future.
In December 2016, a bombshell revelation rocked the world of classified intelligence. WikiLeaks had released top-secret Pentagon documents exposing a hidden war between the US Air Force and unidentified flying objects. According to these explosive files, the center of this interstellar conflict was none other than Antarctica, Earth's most remote and enigmatic continent. During the summer of 2016, the US Missile Defense System detected an entire fleet of UFOs rising from the Southern Ocean and heading at high speed toward the Mexican coast. American fighter jets were immediately scrambled, but just as suddenly as they appeared, the mysterious objects vanished from radar, leaving behind only questions and ripples of fear in high-ranking circles. And this, insiders claimed, was only one of many such encounters in a long-running, covert battle beneath the ice. The story spread like wildfire across forums, alternative news sites, and YouTube channels. Eyewitnesses reported that the surfacing UFOs created enormous waves, damaging ships in the area. Other reports spoke of alien bases discovered deep beneath Antarctic ice, with entire zones marked off-limits to the public. Some even claimed that Russian President Vladimir Putin was being briefed on secret skirmishes between US forces and non-human entities. The truth seemed ready to explode into public view. But how much of this is real? And did WikiLeaks actually publish such world-shattering documents? Since 2010, WikiLeaks has indeed released hundreds of thousands of files, diplomatic cables, military reports, and surveillance data. While some documents reference unusual aerial phenomena, none mention extraterrestrial conflict in Antarctica. The story's origin can be traced to a post on European Times, a dubious website known for spreading unverified claims. It cited anonymous Russian intelligence officers as the source. From there, the tale snowballed through conspiracy blogs that forged fake scans of supposed US documents, complete with seals, signatures, and official stamps. Yet under closer examination, these documents crumble. Fonts are inconsistent with military formatting. Signatures are copy-pasted from unrelated sources, and crucially, no corroborating evidence exists. Why did this theory stick? Despite its shaky foundation, the story refuses to die. Why? 1. Real secrecy in Antarctica. The continent is governed by strict international treaties. Military activity is restricted, creating a veil of mystery that invites speculation. 2. Historical myths. Tales of Nazi bases, ancient alien ruins, and lost civilizations buried under Antarctic ice have long fueled the imaginations of conspiracy theorists. 3. Real UFO sightings. The US military has confirmed encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, such as the famous 2004 Tic Tac incident, adding legitimacy to UFO narratives. 4. The WikiLeaks halo. For many, anything associated with WikiLeaks automatically seems credible. That association lent weight to the fabricated documents. Antarctica's vast, silent expanse is a fertile ground for myth-making. From secret bases to wormholes, the continent has become a canvas for every kind of fantastical speculation. Even real locations like Lake Vostok, a subglacial lake Russian scientists spent decades drilling into, have been dragged into alien lore despite zero scientific evidence. Unusual military flights near Antarctica in 2016 and 2017, including Boeing RC-135 reconnaissance planes, added fuel to the fire. Officials cited training and climate research, but to believers, they were part of a hidden campaign against otherworldly threats. The tale of a secret UFO war exposed by WikiLeaks is thrilling, but ultimately, it doesn't hold up. There's no credible documentation, no trustworthy sources, and no confirmation from WikiLeaks itself. Like many conspiracy theories, this one blends fragments of truth with layers of fiction, creating a narrative too seductive to let go. But seductive isn't the same as true. Behind the allure lies a stark reality. No aliens, no Antarctic war, just another myth, thriving in the shadows of secrecy and our eternal hunger for the extraordinary. Still, as long as Antarctica stays silent, the legends will grow, because nothing feeds the imagination like a blank, frozen slate at the edge of the world.
Meet Otzi, or the Iceman, a natural mummy. He lived sometime between 3,350 and 3,105 BCE. He was discovered in 1991 in the Ostal Alps, near the borders of Austria and Italy, and yes, the nickname derives from the name of the mountain. Otzi is Europe's oldest known naturally mummified human. Otzi was 40-something when it happened. Science is awesome. We even know that he was left-handed and lactose intolerant. He was wearing shoes stuffed with grass and laced with aurochs leather. He also had a fur hat and carried a backpack with everything he needed to quickly make a fire. His body is now kept in a special room at a constant temperature of negative 21 degrees Fahrenheit. These days, Otzi is kind of a celebrity, featured in numerous documentaries and books. A decades-old mystery is solved. In 1942, Marceline and Francine Dumoulin left their home in southwestern Switzerland to get some food, but they never returned. No one knew what had happened to them. A ski resort worker solved the mystery 75 years later. He found two people dressed in 1940s fashion in ice. DNA tests revealed that they were the exact married couple. The couple had 7 children. After their parents' disappearance, the children never stopped looking for them. One of the children, Audrey Dumoulin, said she wouldn't wear black to the ceremony. She thought that white would be more appropriate since it represented hope, which she never lost. I'll take you back to 2016, an ordinary summer day. A gold miner was traveling in search of gold in Canada. He spotted something in the melting ice. He got closer. A treasure greeted him. Well, a treasure for science. The miner found the oldest and most complete wolf mummy ever discovered in the world. This wolf was part of an ecosystem that no longer exists today. The local people named the 57,000-year-old pup Zur, meaning wolf in their language. Experts have been able to get a glimpse of what Zur's life was like thousands of years ago. They've discovered that she mainly ate fish and other seafood instead of large mammals. Previously, scientists assumed that Yukon wolves mainly fed on bison or musk oxen during the Ice Age. You're hiking Mont Blanc in the French Alps. You see a small metal box blinking at you from under the ice. You slowly approach it. Oh, it's full of jewelry worth $340,000. This is a real story. The person who found the box handed it to the police. It turned out that there were hundreds of diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and sapphires inside. The markings said, "Made in India." Police already knew there were two major incidents regarding Indian Airways around the area, but they dated back to 1950 and 1966. The box had been hidden under the ice for at least 5 decades. Experts couldn't identify the owner of the previous gems. They believed that the box belonged to a passenger who was going to New York to sell the jewels. Well, let's hope the buyer didn't make any prepayment. Every year, new stuff comes to the surface in the area when ice melts. For instance, newspapers with headlines from the time when Gandhi became India's prime minister. Climbers also routinely find luggage and other personal items there. Let's travel 39,000 years back in time. Meet Yucca, the woolly mammoth. Yucca is special because it's the best preserved mammoth ever found. Local tusk hunters discovered it in 2010. Yucca became a natural mummy thanks to the ice preserving it. Scientists made analyses that revealed that Yucca was a 6-year-old female mammoth. Now, how about some ice worms? Yes, those do exist. They live on glacial ice in Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. They spend their whole life on ice. You can see them on the surface of glaciers 2 times a day, in the evening and in the morning. They go up to feed on snow algae. Scientists call them a scientific paradox. When temperatures are low, any creature's bodily reactions slow down and energy levels drop. Cold-blooded creatures like worms become sluggish when it gets too cold. But the laws of nature don't seem to apply to ice worms. They thrive and are very active when it's freezing cold. But as glaciers are melting, ice worms' habitats disappear too. Ice worms can be up to 1 inch long and are black or blue in color. Fun fact, there are stories and songs about them. Supposedly, they give glaciers' ice their blue color, but it's just a myth. This horned lark is an Ice Age animal, not the cartoon, the actual one. Local fossil ivory hunters found this frozen lark in Siberia in 2018. Luckily, they notified experts about their discovery. After the examination, scientists found out that the bird had lived around 46,000 years ago. The most interesting thing is that the bird was in such good shape, considering that it had been under ice for millions of years. Experts say that the lark looked as if whatever had happened to it occurred just a few days ago. Turns out, the bird lived in the same era as other Ice Age animals, for example, mammoths. This book was lost for decades. It belonged to George Murray Levick, a surgeon and photographer. In 1910, he was on an expedition to Antarctica. Levick and his teammates spent months observing penguins, but they had to drop everything due to harsh weather conditions. Levick and his team were trapped in the area. They survived by digging a tight ice cave. Eventually, a ship managed to get to a nearby location and they were saved. But Levick left his notebook behind. It had lists of dates, subjects, and photographs he took at Cape Adare. Most pages of the book got dissolved, yet experts managed to save what was left of it. The notebook was published a century after it had been written. Look at this bone. It belongs to a scimitar cat. The bone was found in Klondike, Alaska. What makes it unique is that scientists managed to extract DNA from it. They found out it was a pre-Ice Age animal, more than 50,000 years old. Scientists used to assume there weren't any scimitar cats in the world, but this bone debunked previous theories. Plus, researchers found out that these cats had had natural hunting abilities, good eyesight, and endurance for long-distance running. At one point in the past, the number of animals the cats hunted started to decline, and ultimately, scimitar cats were outcompeted and eventually disappeared. Not just iceworms, but also viruses live in ice. Researchers revived 33 types of ancient viruses, which had been frozen 15,000 years ago. 28 of them were unknown to science. It might sound a bit scary, but scientists say that these viruses are unlikely to harm people. You can put your doomsday pack aside. Before, viruses even older than these ones were revived without any problems. For instance, in 2014, scientists found a virus that was around 30,000 years old in, guess where? Yes, Siberia. But microbes that can cause problems do concern scientists. For example, after a heat wave in 1941, bacteria got out of a frozen reindeer carcass trapped under Siberian permafrost. Several people living in a nearby village were hospitalized because of the effects of the virus. Who knows what other viruses can be trapped in older permafrost layers? Well, let's hope they remain where they are. Fingers crossed. Bonus: in the 1960s, an underground facility was built in Denmark. The details of the project were first revealed only in 1995. When the facility was decommissioned in 1967, its infrastructure and waste were left untouched. Authorities probably thought that the facility would be forever entombed by snow and ice. But studies claim otherwise. When the ice melts, the camp will reappear, and so will everything in it. Let's hope nothing unpleasant comes to the surface.
We've all dreamed of visiting the Arctic and witnessing the natural wonders of polar bears frolicking on ice floes or the aurora borealis dancing across the sky. Well, sorry to break it to you, but you won't find any tourists flocking to Antarctica anytime soon. Why, you may ask? Let's dive into it. First off, where is Antarctica? It's located in the southern hemisphere, specifically at the South Pole. The Southern Ocean surrounds it, and most of the continent is covered by ice, making it one of the most remote and frigid places on Earth. Now, have you ever met someone who's visited Antarctica? Probably not. It's one of the least visited places on the planet, and only a handful of lucky explorers have seen its interior, which is mostly made up of glaciers and ice fields. But trust me when I say the wildlife and scenery are out of this world. Why shouldn't you travel to Antarctica? Well, for starters, the environment is incredibly fragile and can be easily damaged. Plus, there are no native human populations on the continent, so your travels would essentially be like visiting an uninhabited island. And let's not forget that it's also one of the most expensive destinations to travel to. Despite all that, Antarctica is not exactly guarded like a fortress, but there is an international agreement called the Antarctic Treaty. This treaty was negotiated to prevent any unwanted activity on the continent and bans some forms of testing done there by member states. But the primary reason we can't just waltz into Antarctica is that it has a delicate ecosystem that needs protection. The treaty states that Antarctica should be used for peaceful purposes only and should be free from any human activity that could harm the environment. Scientists are still learning about the continent's unique ecosystem, and our activity and machines could disrupt the delicate balance that exists there. If you're still itching to go to Antarctica, getting permission isn't exactly a walk in the park. U.S. citizens, for example, need to complete a special form and send it to the Office of Ocean and Polar Affairs. And once you're there, you'll need to follow some strict guidelines to protect the environment, like not disturbing any wildlife or taking souvenirs like rocks, plants, or animals. Now, technically, can you live in Antarctica? While there are no laws banning people from living there permanently, it's a very inhospitable environment and unsuitable for human habitation. Temperatures can reach -76 degrees Fahrenheit and below, making it nearly impossible for anyone to survive without the proper equipment and experience. Plus, the nearest piece of land is over 1,000 miles away, making any inhabitants completely cut off from the rest of the world. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll get the chance to visit this unique and fascinating continent. But until then, let's admire it from afar. Let's now talk a bit about the discovery of Antarctica. Unlike other places that were already inhabited, Antarctica never had a native human population. Ancient Greek philosophers had an idea about the continent and called it Antarctos, meaning opposite the bear. The bears it refers to are not the polar ones though, but rather the Great and Little Bear constellations, which are only observable in the northern hemisphere. As a result, the term signifies the opposite of the land of the bear. Whaling and sealing voyages in the late 1700s and early 1800s would venture further south when rounding Cape Horn at the tip of South America. It was known that going further south often meant stronger winds, but also the risk of hitting floating ice of all sizes and of winds and seas that could prove dangerous to the ship and crew. Captain James Cook was the first to cross the Antarctic Circle on January 17, 1773, in the Ross Sea region. He reached a point further north a year later, and though he didn't sight land, he came to within 50 miles and saw deposits of rock held in icebergs, indicating that a more southerly land existed. The first sighting of Antarctica is widely acknowledged to have taken place in January of 1820, during the voyage of two ships under the command of Captain Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen, as part of a 2-year exploratory expedition around the world to discover new lands. The captain's ships were the first to have crossed the Antarctic Circle since Cook. The first undisputed landing on Antarctica didn't happen until much later, on January 24, 1895, at Cape Adare during the whaling voyage of the ship Antarctic, led by Henrik Bull. A small boat with 6 or possibly 7 men on board rowed ashore during calm conditions. You might not believe it, but Antarctica is actually a desert. With all that ice, you'd think it'd be like a winter wonderland with snowball fights and hot cocoa all day long. When we think of deserts, we picture camels and cacti and people struggling to find water. But in Antarctica, it's a whole different story. The struggle isn't to find water, it's to find anything that's not covered in ice. And the average rainfall has been just over 0.4 inches in the past 30 years. That's like a few drops of rain compared to what we're used to. So technically, it's not the dunes or sizzling heat that makes a desert, well, a desert. It's the lack of precipitation. But don't worry, if you ever find yourself lost in Antarctica, you won't have to worry about getting thirsty. Just make sure you bring a jacket and some mittens, because it's cold enough to make you into a popsicle. Not only is Antarctica one of the driest places on Earth, but it's also the coldest, the windiest, and the highest. Talk about overachieving. The penguins and scientists down in Antarctica have at times found themselves in a bit of a pickle when it comes to time. You see, unlike the rest of us on this big blue planet, there is no Antarctica time zone. All the lines of longitude meet at a single point at the South Pole, making it a bit of a head-scratcher when trying to figure out what time it is. Now, you might be thinking, but how do the scientists and researchers keep track of time down there? Good question. They typically stick to the time zone of the country they departed from. However, with stations from all over the world on the Antarctic Peninsula, things can get a little wacky. Imagine trying to coordinate with your neighboring countries without accidentally waking them up in the middle of the night. You might think that not much could survive in a place where the temperature is extremely cold, the sun barely shows up, and the wind could blow you away faster than a tumbleweed. Well, as in many places on Earth, life found a way in Antarctica too. Believe it or not, this frozen continent is buzzing with activity. It's home to billions of krill, which in turn attract lots of seals and more penguins than you can shake a fish at. But don't let their cute and cuddly appearance fool you. Penguins are the ultimate swimmers, with streamlined bodies that would make Olympic medal winners jealous. They come ashore to breed and chill, but their real talent is stealing pebbles from each other and forming mathematically precise huddles to stay warm. Antarctica is also home to the largest species of penguin on Earth. It's called the emperor penguin. Sure, these creatures are flightless birds, but that doesn't mean they can't jump. In fact, some of them can leap up to 120 inches. And let's not forget about the seals. With their furry bodies and special songs, these marine mammals are protected by the Antarctic Treaty, and they're thriving in the cool waters of the Southern Ocean too. But the real stars of the show are the whales. During the Antarctic summer, these huge creatures show up in droves to chow down on the abundant krill. It's indeed like a whale buffet down there.
There's a ship drifting somewhere in the ocean without a crew. The last time someone saw it was over 50 years ago. Its story reminds of that of the Flying Dutchman, a ship that's bound to sail forever and bring disaster to whoever sees it at sea. At least the legend says so. Unlike the Flying Dutchman, the SS Bay Chimo was definitely real and built for a German company in Hamburg and began as an ordinary cargo ship. It was trading supplies between Hamburg and Sweden in the Baltic Sea starting from 1914. It had a strong steam engine and a hull made of steel. A few years later, it became British property. Then, in the 1920s, a Canadian company purchased it for around $18,000, a huge amount of money back then. The new owner, the Hudson's Bay Company, was actively using the ship for several years. They would often send it on voyages from its home port in Scotland to Siberia, Alaska, the Yukon, and the Northwest Territories. It also passed through the Panama Canal and even the Suez Canal, with fur pelts for sale on board. Sometimes it would also transport passengers. It had completed 9 successful voyages before this strip of good luck came to an end. Starting from the 1930s, SS Bay Chimo would have trouble with ice and storms. When it first got trapped in ice in October of 1931, some of the crew managed to escape to Alaska. 15 of 22 sailors decided to stay with their vessel and try to save it. They had furs and other valuable cargo worth around $58,000 aboard. The company sent them supplies to survive the winter. They set camp near the ship out of the hatches, tarpaulins, and other materials, and offloaded the cargo. At the end of November, a blizzard rushed through the area, and it seemed like it had taken the ship with it. The ice platform had survived, but the ship broke free. Some of the crew members were sure it had sunk. But soon after, they heard from one of the locals who had spotted their ship around 45 miles away from their camp. The crew moved on with their lives, and the ship started its journey as a runaway vessel. People would spot SS Bay Chimo once a year or so, all the way until 1965. It was mostly spotted off the coast of Alaska. A man going to Nome with his sled dog, along with prospectors, explorers, and treasure hunters, all claimed to have seen SS Bay Chimo. Someone tried to board it and take it to port, but ended up stranded on it for days because of horrible weather. Others got luckier and managed to take a whaleboat, some furniture, and other valuables from the vessel. Those who got close to the ship saw that it was damaged and missing the propeller. Still, it stayed afloat without a crew for at least 38 years and became the longest sailing ghost ship in history. In 2006, the Alaskan authorities started a project to solve the mystery of this ghost ship of the Arctic and finally find SS Bay Chimo, either still above or below the water. So far, the project has not been a success. SS Bay Chimo remains one of the estimated 4,000 ships that have disappeared off Alaskan shores. If the legend of the 17th century isn't lying, this ghost ship could be sailing somewhere along the Flying Dutchman. It belonged to the Dutch East India Company. Its captain managed to do the impossible for that time and sailed from Holland to Indonesia in only 3 months. They said he was flying over the sea, and some evil tongues explained that he had made a deal with evil forces to achieve that. Once the ship was sailing back home, its captain and crew disappeared without a trace. There are many versions of what happened to it. One of the first ones said it had tried to enter port at the Cape of Good Hope, got in a terrible storm, and sank as there was no captain to save it. Another legend says the captain had refused to obey the skies to let the ship sink during the storm. A scary light form then struck the boat and the crew, and it was condemned to forever wander without rest. Many sailors claim to have spotted the Wandering Dutchman. The Duke of York, who was to become King of England, mentioned having seen it in Australian waters. Right after spotting the ship, the man who saw it first fell from the top of the mast and didn't survive. There were more encounters with this legendary ship up to the middle of the 20th century. Ships would nearly collide with it as the Flying Dutchman jumped out of the blue. Scientists have a more logical explanation for this mystery: Fata Morgana, not to be confused with Hakuna Matata. Now, when you're out at sea on a hot day and the air is all wavy, it feels like when you look at the road on a scorching summer day. That's because of something called atmospheric refraction. When light passes through different layers of air with different temperatures and densities, it bends and twists. Sometimes, under certain conditions, this bending of light can create really bizarre optical illusions over the ocean, like sightings of the Flying Dutchman. The Fata Morgana phenomenon can make distant objects appear distorted, stretched, or even lifted above the horizon. So you can see a ship far away, but because of the way the light is bending, it will look like it's floating above the water or even disappearing and reappearing. A Fata Morgana is most commonly seen in polar regions, especially over large sheets of ice that have a uniform low temperature. But you can see it anywhere, even in deserts and over lakes on hot days. The first stories about ghost ships go all the way back to ancient Greek and Roman mythology. One of the most famous ghost ships in history is the Mary Celeste. This brigantine was traveling from New York City to Genoa and was fully stocked with provisions, but missing a crew when it was discovered in the Atlantic Ocean in 1872. The crew's personal belongings were also there, completely undisturbed. The final entry in their log was made 10 days earlier. We still don't know what happened to its crew, and the ship has inspired many spooky stories and legends. The Lady Lovibond was another legendary schooner that is believed to have been wrecked off the coast of Kent in the middle of the 18th century. The story tells that the ship's captain, Simon Reed, had just got married and took his bride on board for a celebratory cruise, despite the superstition that it could bring bad luck. They were on their way to Portugal when the first mate, who is also in love with the captain's new wife, went mad because of jealousy, attacked another crew member, and then took over the wheel and steered the ship straight into the dreaded Goodwin Sands. No one aboard survived, and the schooner is said to reappear as a ghost vessel every 50 years. In present times, many vessels become abandoned and turned into ghost ships intentionally. There are thousands of them floating in U.S. rivers, lakes, channels, and coastal waters. Some people lose their boats in storms and other extreme weather. Others have to abandon their boats because maintaining them can cost 10% of the boat's price. Plus, docking a vessel can add up to several $1,000s every year. Most boats have been made of fiberglass, so an owner can't just recycle them as scrap metal. So, once they want to get rid of it, they often tie it to a dock and sneak away, or leave it floating far away from the shore, or just try to sink it. When ghost ships sink in shallow waters, they can cause damage to coral reefs, mangroves, marshlands, oyster habitats, and wetlands. Plus, they can collide with unsuspecting regular ships and cause real trouble. So, don't do that. Enough said.
This sleek, state-of-the-art submarine named Ran was sent to explore the depths of Antarctica. But as soon as it discovered something, it mysteriously disappeared. So, what happened? It all started when scientists wanted to explore one of the most remote and mysterious places on Earth, the Dotson Ice Shelf in West Antarctica. This ice shelf, silent giant, stretches 30 miles wide. That's almost the length of New York City. It stands between two icy promontories, the Martin and Bear Peninsulas, and it hides an entire world of geological mysteries. If you think that Antarctica is nothing but a desert of super thick snow and ice, you're wrong. There are entire landscapes hidden deep down there. The underside of the Dodson ice shelf is a rugged, dynamic terrain shaped by the slow, relentless forces of nature. There are towering ice formations, deep troughs, and bizarre structures stretching for hundreds of feet. Scientists are super curious about it, but as you can imagine, this landscape isn't easy to explore at all. To find out more, we have to scan the area with satellites or try drilling through the snow, trying to collect the big picture, piece by piece. But these methods only gave us vague hints. The real breakthrough happened when scientists came up with the idea to let the submarines explore it. Autonomous submersibles could swoop deep into the icy waters beneath the Dodson ice shelf and tell us what's up down there. These robotic explorers have fantastic advanced sonar systems. It's that thing that bats or dolphins do. They can use sound to see the world. Basically, they send out sound waves underwater, and when those waves hit something like the ice shelf above or the seafloor below, they bounce back to the system. Animals feel how long it took for the sound waves to return and how they changed. And this helped them understand what's located where. For example, clicks that dolphins send out tell them where the fish are. We copied this crazy evolutionary trick and adapted it to our underwater exploration. Only our version is much cooler, with a higher level of precision, so we created detailed maps of the environment. The Rand submarine was one of those robotic explorers. It was named after the Norse deity of the sea. Ran had been meticulously programmed to navigate a treacherous landscape of Antarctica. But even with all this training, its journey led to an unexpected and eerie end. In 2019, Ran was sent to explore the depths beneath the Dodson ice shelf. It was a hero, the first one to go on a mission like this. The team said it was like seeing the other side of the moon. For 27 straight days, it worked tirelessly. It traveled over 620 miles beneath the thick ice. That's like a journey from Paris to Berlin. Ran went further and deeper than anyone could have imagined. At one point, it reached over 10 miles into the glacier's belly, and what it discovered down there was astonishing. Scientists thought there would be some smooth, uniform ice surfaces, but Ran revealed an underside marked by huge cracks, ridges. There were formations that looked like sand dunes, frozen in time. And finally, it found some mysterious swirling and teardrop-shaped patterns. They all looked more like art than geology. This actually tells the story of ice shelves and the ocean around it. Warm water sneaks in under the ice and melts it from below. Sometimes it smooths the ice out, but other times it carves out these weird, uneven shapes that look like patterns and drawings. And some of these shapes are huge, over 1,300 feet long. That's about 3.5 football fields. The reason why they look like swirling doodles is because the Earth spins. It makes the water turn in special ways, bending the shapes and drawing these spirals. It's called the Coriolis effect. Imagine you were on a merry-go-round and tried to throw something like a ball. It would go in a curve, not a straight line. Same thing happens with the water on Earth. Later, scientists found similar patterns in other Antarctic ice shelves, though they weren't as epic as the ones under Dodson. But Ran also discovered something horrifying. Turns out that these warm waters, aside from being great artists, are also a huge danger. The Dodson ice shelf isn't just hanging out serenely on the sea. It's part of a very delicate system and acts as a protective barrier that holds back huge glaciers in West Antarctica. The ice shelf is floating on the ocean, but it's still connected to the land. As warm water sneaks underneath it and the ice melts, the Dodson can't hold on to the land as tightly anymore. The protective barrier starts to weaken, and this lets the glaciers behind it move faster into the ocean. When those glaciers flow into the sea, they add more water, which could cause sea levels to rise, eventually changing our coastlines. Rand stumbled upon huge pockets where the ice was melting at alarming rates, all due to powerful underwater currents. It was like seeing a ticking clock on the glacier. The stakes were high, but luckily the submarine was ready. This time, it managed to return. And then, it worked for 5 more years, helping scientists with tons of useful data. The missions were daunting. There could be periods where Rand slipped into the pitch-black cavity beneath the glaciers, spending 24 hours without communication. But it was mapping every peak and every valley. It gained experience from over 40 missions below ice. Then, in early 2024, Rand went on a mission to the Thwaites Glacier. The mission was bold from the start. This place is also ominously referred to as the Doomsday Glacier. It's called that because it's slowly melting and has the potential to raise sea levels worldwide if it collapses, causing catastrophes everywhere. That's why Rand was dispatched to explore its underbelly, a place that had never been mapped so intricately before. The idea was to uncover the glacier's secrets, study how rapidly it was melting, and why. This was Rand's second time exploring Thwaites. During the previous visit, it became the first sub to ever map the glacier's underside. Rand was exploring the depths from 650 feet to 1,650 feet. It sent a lot of data about how the Doomsday Glacier was slowly melting due to warm ocean currents. But while venturing into these icy depths, something went wrong. Out of nowhere, Rand vanished. Without warning, without a trace. One moment it was sending back crucial data, and the next it had slipped into the abyss. No distress signals, no final transmission, and it didn't return to the point it was supposed to. People sent extensive searches, helicopters soared overhead, drones buzzed through the frozen skies, but no sign of the submersible emerged from the glacier's grasp. After a while, Rand's batteries would certainly run away, so at this point, it had definitely been swallowed by the abyss beneath 1,500 feet of ice. That was a huge and sad loss for the scientific team. The scientists at the University of Gothenburg are now looking to replace Rand and continue their important research under Thwaites. To this day, scientists have no idea what happened to it. Some say it may have been trapped in the ice. Others believe it was pulled away by an unseen current. It also might have collided with something unexpected. Whatever the truth is, its disappearance has left scientists stunned, and it looks like the ice shelf will hold on to its secrets a little longer. At least we gained a treasure trove of knowledge from Rand's journey. Scientists keep exploring Antarctica, looking for history that hides under the snow. For example, they discovered that around 90 million years ago, a lush temperate rainforest thrived near the South Pole. They revealed an ancient world far warmer than they ever imagined. Deep in Antarctica, they unearthed fossilized roots, pollen, and spores preserved in the soil. All this shows that there was a swampy rainforest that flourished despite months of polar darkness. All these discoveries changed our understanding of Earth's climate, both in the past and the future.
So what comes to your mind when you hear the word Antarctica? Most likely, cold, snow, ice, and penguins. Yet, this is one of the least explored regions in the world that hides many strange and unique things. Check them out. You don't have to go to Antarctica to see this weird thing. All you need to do is open Google Earth and move to one of the southernmost islands of Antarctica, King George Island. Recently, internet users have noticed a large and pretty strange cave entrance there. Where does this wide, dark passage lead? People started making suggestions. It's the entrance to a secret base or some laboratory. This is the part of the spaceship that crashed there thousands of years ago. This is the door to the ancient city of Antarctica. Perhaps there's a giant rock mountain with an ancient cave beneath all this snow and ice. Well, there's some ideas. Users have calculated the approximate dimensions of this cave. It might be about 74 feet high and 250 feet wide. You could hide a Boeing passenger jet in there. Nature probably created this entrance. This is a logical explanation, but there are two strange factors. First, take a look at the foot of the mountain. It seems that there are steps there. They're dark in color, as if they're made of stone. And if you look closely, you can notice something similar to human footprints. Has anyone entered this cave? Or maybe someone is still living there now. The second oddity is the disappearance of the mysterious finding. For the first time, people noticed it in a Google Maps snap in 2007. Then the entrance disappeared. Then it reappeared a few years later. After that, it vanished. And in 2022, people saw it again. Perhaps old snow melts, a new layer falls, and then the wind blows it away and the cycle repeats. But the alleged steps leading deep into the cave make one doubt the natural origin of this tunnel. You can easily find the coordinates on the internet and visit the cave via Google Earth. You might see something there and tell the world. There's another strange thing people discovered with the help of Google Earth. In 2020, one user found a strange object that looked like a giant ship 100 miles off the coast of Antarctica. It was covered with ice and snow and lying on its side. It looked like a cruise ship. You could notice the windows, the deck, and the bridge. But not all people agreed with this. Some claimed it was a spaceship. Others said it was some kind of secret building. The user who first noticed the ship stated that its size was about 400 feet, which is the perfect length for a passenger vessel. But what is this ship doing in such a remote place in the middle of a glacier? How did it get here? Who was its captain? No one has found the answers to these questions yet. In 2016, people using Google Earth discovered a photo of an unknown sea monster floating off the coast of Antarctica. This creature resembled a giant squid with a length of about 200 feet. This is slightly shorter than 3 train cars. Just imagine this kraken swimming in Antarctica's dark, icy waters and dragging to the bottom everything it meets on its way. Maybe it's the great and terrible Chulu, or one of its offspring. You will quickly notice this blood-red waterfall among Antarctica's endless, dazzling white landscapes. Don't worry, it's not blood. For many centuries, the waterfall has been painting snow in a bright red color. The stream flows straight out of a white iceberg. Let's look inside and find out what's happening there. Millions of years ago, there was a small crystal-clear pond, but then a glacier formed around it. A thick layer of ice and snow blocks sunlight, heat, and oxygen access. For millennia, the reservoir remained in this cold vacuum. But at one point, the water made a hole in the icy wall and broke out. When this salty water comes into contact with oxygen, it immediately turns scarlet or rusty. Antarctica is the only place where you can find such a unique natural phenomenon. One of the driest places on Earth is located in Antarctica. It's one of the most lifeless deserts in the world, the McMurdo Dry Valleys. In this desert, you won't see the scorching sun, hot sand, and cacti. A desert means a place with a lack of precipitation and life. The McMurdo Dry Valleys meet these parameters. But this place is also unique for Antarctica, since you won't find glaciers there. Despite the frost, ice can't form in the desert because it hasn't rained for millions of years there. It also never snows. A strong wind coming from the mountains reaches speeds up to 200 miles per hour. It would be difficult for you to stay on your feet there. The wind is filled with moisture. It heats up and evaporates all the liquid and snow in the desert because of its high speed. Only dry air reaches the ground. But you can find several lakes there. They don't freeze, only thanks to the high concentration of salt. The water is so salty that large life forms can't develop there. But scientists have found microscopic organisms near the lakes. 20 million years ago, Antarctica was filled with swamps and trees and swarming with insects and animals. But now, it resembles the surface of Mars, literally. Scientists and astronauts are exploring such regions as the McMurdo Dry Valleys, since the natural conditions there are similar to those on the Red Planet. So, before you go to Mars, you can practice living in similar places on Earth. Also, scientists discovered an underwater world in the Antarctic filled with hundreds of amphipods, crustacean animals similar to shrimp. Wait a minute, it happened in the Antarctic? But the McMurdo Dry Valleys are located in Antarctica. Well, the words are very similar, but what is the difference? Oh, and don't forget the Arctic. The Antarctic is the region in the southernmost part of Earth that houses the continent of Antarctica, and the Arctic is another land altogether. They have the same natural conditions, frost, ice, and snow, but they're located in different parts of the planet. The Arctic is at the North Pole, Antarctica is at the South Pole. Now, back to the discovery. Scientists put forward theories that the ice of the Antarctic hides a vast network of freshwater rivers and lakes. And in 2022, they found a new ecosystem. Researchers explored the Antarctic Ross ice shelf and its underwater rivers. This is a massive piece of ice floating in the ocean. A team from New Zealand used a special drilling rig equipped with a hot water supply to drill a hole 1,640 feet deep. That's more than the height of the Empire State Building. Then, they lowered some video cameras and saw thousands of crustaceans swimming in different directions. So it seems they're very unorganized. In the waters of the Antarctic, you can also meet some of the scariest creatures on the planet. These are sea spiders. They got this name because they resemble land spiders, but they're actually a species of marine arthropods. And unlike land spiders, those in the ocean are much larger. They look like 8 strong legs without a body. One such spider can be a dinner plate in width. Some of them have no eyes and have proboscises instead of jaws. Sea spiders are poorly studied because they live in deep, cold waters. Antarctica hides many little-known animals. There are long tunnels in its glaciers leading to scary darkness. On this cold continent, people have found the remains of giant dinosaurs and other ancient creatures, such as the ancestors of modern ducks. Many underground rivers and lakes hide unexplored wildlife. Even the ice here can be weird. Take a look at these striped icebergs. They have blue, black, green, and turquoise shapes. The color depends on the conditions of the water during freezing. For example, green lines appear because of algae. Blue ones form when the water freezes too quickly. Okay, I'm freezing. Time to go thaw somewhere warmer. Hawaii. Yeah.
Strange things occur in the cold waters of Antarctica. One of these things happened to a ship called Jenny. It was a small schooner whose history began in 1822. The boat and its crew set sail and disappeared a year later. For 18 years, the ship was considered sunk. People forgot about it, but in 1840, the vessel reminded the world of itself. That year, the whaling ship Hope sailed through the Drake Channel in Antarctica. The crew members noticed a ship among icebergs. It was the schooner Jenny. It was floating slowly in the dark, with no signs of life. The captain of the Hope, Mr. Brighton, gave the order to approach the mysterious vessel. They thought it was some creepy ghost ship, but as they came closer, they noticed crew members on the deck. The sailors of the Hope called out to them, but received no answer. This time, it became clear that something terrible had happened to the Jenny. When Brighton boarded, he realized that the Jenny crew members weren't missing. They were here. Frozen people stood like statues. Brighton went down to the lower deck and found the captain. He was sitting frozen at the table, holding a pen. Brighton looked at the logbook. The last record was made on May 4th, 1823. The captain wrote that he was the only living member of the crew. They spent 71 days without food. It seemed that the ship got lost in the sea because its captain went off course or sailed into an iceberg, but no one knew for sure. After that, nobody ever saw the Jenny again. According to rumors, the crew of the Hope abandoned the frozen ship and left it to drift in the cold waters. According to other rumors, this whole story is fiction. The story of the Jenny was described in a German magazine in the middle of the 19th century. Still, there was no further evidence of the ship's existence. Already in our time, Cambridge University decided to explore the case of the Jenny. The researchers discovered that one of the crew members of the Hope, who didn't disclose his name, told someone the legend of the frozen ship. Someone shared the story with another guy, and it was published in a German magazine called Globus. And that's all. There was no other evidence. One of the most famous ghost ships was the Mary Celeste, and there's no doubt about its existence. The history of this vessel was documented in court. People wrote about it in newspapers, but the most exciting thing is that the ship continued to be used even after 10 people disappeared from its deck. The history of the Mary Celeste began in Canada in 1861. When it was first built, the ship was called the Amazon. It changed captains several times, and it also hit some rocks. The boat was sold, bought, then sold again, repaired, and sailed under the name Mary Celeste. In 1872, it had a new captain, Benjamin Briggs. He was a decent, brave man with a lot of experience in navigation. He had a beloved wife, a daughter, and a son. When he went on his last voyage, he took his wife and daughter with him, and his son stayed in America. In November of 1872, the Mary Celeste sailed from the port in New York with 10 people on board and disappeared. 8 days later, another ship, the Dei Gratia, also left New York and followed the same route. Dei Gratia's captain, David Morehouse, noticed the Mary Celeste and immediately realized something was wrong. The ship was moving too freely, as if no one was controlling it. The captain tried to contact the crew members, but no one answered him. Then, together with other sailors, he climbed aboard the Mary Celeste. The ship was in good condition. There was no damage. The hold was slightly filled with water, but it could be easily pumped out. Everything seemed fine, but one lifeboat was missing. The crew members' valuables were in their cabins. The cargo was in the hold. The supplies of water and food were untouched. Judging by the records in the logbook, the ship was caught in a storm, but it was not too strong. Other ships also sailed through this storm, but nothing bad happened to them. The last record was dated November 25th, and it claimed that everything was fine. The sails of the Mary Celeste were slightly damaged, but perhaps it happened after the crew had disappeared. The whole ship was in excellent condition, but what made the people leave it? Part of the crew of the Dei Gratia stayed on board the Mary Celeste to bring it to dry land. Everything went well. They delivered the ship to the closest port. Next, the captain of the Dei Gratia appeared before the court and told about what had happened. However, the prosecutor and the judge didn't want to believe in the story of the Mary Celeste. They were sure the captain got rid of the ship's crew to get money for its cargo. According to the maritime laws of that time, if you found a ghost ship with valuable cargo, then a substantial part of this cargo belonged to you. So, many people thought that David Morehouse decided to earn some money. This version seemed to be more valid than the one about the mysterious disappearance of 10 people. Fortunately, no one accused the captain of committing a crime. They thanked him for his service and gave him a monetary reward. However, his reputation was damaged, which greatly affected his career, as many believed he attacked the crew of the Mary Celeste. But even after this terrible case, trial, and investigation, the story was not over. The Mary Celeste was still an expensive and efficient vessel. It sailed several times, but then one captain crashed it into the reefs to get insurance. The court revealed this deception and accused the captain of intentional property damage. The story of the Mary Celeste became famous all over the world. People began to build their theories, realistic and not. Someone believed the ship had sailed through the Bermuda Triangle, but this version was quickly refuted, as the route of the Mary Celeste passed thousands of miles away from the Bermuda region. Did the Kraken or another giant monster attack the ship? Nope. Since the boat was found in almost perfect condition, there were no signs of a struggle. One of the most popular versions was that the crew of the Mary Celeste stole some valuable cargo and sailed to Spain on the rescue boat. However, those who knew Captain Benjamin Briggs said he was a good, honest man. Besides, he had a son in New York, and Briggs would never leave him. A more thorough investigation revealed that a series of accidental circumstances could have caused the disappearance of the ship's crew. Before its last voyage, the vessel delivered coal. Perhaps the pump intended for pumping water got clogged with coal after that, and when the ship got into a storm, the hold filled with water and the pump broke. The captain couldn't understand the amount of water because numerous barrels in the cargo hold blocked the view. Benjamin Briggs assumed it was dangerous to stay on the ship during a storm, so he evacuated with the passengers on a lifeboat. Perhaps they were close to land and decided to sail there, but the storm intensified and overturned the boat. Also, one record in the log journal said that the chronometer was faulty. It was a device that helped to determine your location at sea using longitude. Briggs got lost and didn't know which way to sail. The storm was strong, and he couldn't determine whether the ship would sink. Perhaps Briggs decided to leave the ship in a rescue boat when he saw the coast of the Azores. The uniqueness of this ghost ship case is that, unlike many others, you can investigate it yourself. There's a lot of information about the Mary Celeste on the internet. There are documentaries and research articles. Perhaps you'll be able to notice something that others haven't seen and solve the mystery of the disappearance of 10 people.
Leave it to people wandering on Google Earth to stumble upon the world's newest and weirdest places ever. Like this mysterious pyramid discovered in Antarctica. Soon enough, the internet blew up with all sorts of theories regarding this unusual shape. Could it be a sign from a different life form? Is this pyramid indeed natural, or is it man-made? For starters, it's not the first time we've discovered a pyramid in the Antarctic. The first one was observed by the British Antarctic expedition in the 1910s and kept secret for a long time. Its discovery being kept hidden only added to the mystery. A second such structure was discovered in 2016, which further increased the interest in the matter. The mystery was soon enough deciphered by scientists. These formations are just mountains. They're located near the Ellsworth Mountains, a range over 250 miles long, so they're just mountain peaks that have broken through the ice sheet. As for their particular shape, it's just a coincidence. Pyramids are found throughout nature. The Matterhorn in the Alps and Mount Ballenstinder in Iceland, for example, are quite similar in terms of shape. As for the official name of these peaks, they're called nunataks, or peaks of rock peeking through a glacier or an ice sheet. Antarctica has way more incredible features, like the fact that it's home of 60 to 90% of the world's fresh water. That's because its ice sheet is the biggest on our planet, stretching across 5.4 million square miles. I'll spare you the calculations, but that leaves only 1% of the continent ice-free. Antarctica's ice reaches 2.7 miles thick at its deepest point, meaning half the height of Mount Everest. Should it ever melt completely, our sea levels would rise to roughly 200 feet. It wasn't always this cold, though. At some point in our planet's history, Antarctica had some average temperatures as the city of Melbourne has today. It took a lot of research, but scientists figured out that Antarctica's temperatures could have reached up to 62.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Sure, that was 40 to 50 million years ago, but if you think about it, it was at the same time when dinosaurs roamed our Earth. Time is also different on this icy continent. All the lines of longitude that help us calculate different time zones merge into a single point at the South Pole. Here, there are 6 months of daylight in the summer, followed by 6 months of complete darkness during the colder season. So, scientists working here stay, on average, in the same time zone they've come from. The Blood Falls aren't a chapter of a thriller movie. They are merely a series of waterfalls located in one of the driest regions of Antarctica. They emerge from an underground lake filled with a special type of bacteria. These little organisms use sulfates as fuel instead of sugars, which makes them very intriguing for scientists. The water contained in this lake is so full of iron that it basically just rusts when it meets air. So, the reddish color of the waterfall also gives it its trademark name. The megalodon was the largest predator ever known in our planet's history. In terms of its location, the megalodon lived practically in all waters on our globe, except near the poles. The reason why there are no megalodon teeth found in Antarctica is probably because the gigantic creature was adapted to only warm tropical and subtropical waters. If you plan to visit Antarctica by boat someday, just know you might not get there on a non-metallic boat. The hull of your transportation device must be made of either steel or aluminum to withstand the harsh weather conditions here. Antarctica isn't home to a lot of bugs. In fact, there is only one true species of insect that calls this place home. It's a wingless midge called Belgica antarctica. This fly is so tiny that it only reaches 0.08 to 0.23 inches long, but it's still the Antarctic's largest terrestrial animal. A lot of Antarctic fish also come with an antifreeze substance in their blood. They don't necessarily need it for protection against the cold temperature, but mostly against touching ice. These antifreezes are made up of large glycoprotein molecules. They surround any small ice crystals that may form, making sure they don't spread through the animal's tissues, which could cause a lot of damage. They also create a sort of small pillow blocking the sharp ice crystals, so they're less likely to cause any pain. It also doesn't rain a lot here on this icy continent, but one amazing meteorological quirk of Antarctica is that it's full of diamond dust. This dust is basically small ice crystals that pop out of humid air close to the Earth's surface. Think of it like an icy fog. As they flow through the air and get touched by sunlight, they begin to sparkle, making visitors here feel like they're surrounded by diamonds. It's probably the last place you'd want to go into labor, but in 1978, the first person was born here ever. Emil Marco Palma was its name, and ever since, 10 other people have been born here in Antarctica. There's a lake on this icy continent that is so full of salt, it makes it impossible for it to freeze over, even if temperatures can go as low as 5 degrees Fahrenheit. That's because pure water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Water that has salt in it, or any other substance for that matter, will freeze, but at a way lower temperature. That lower temperature is adjustable depending on the substance itself and the amount that has been placed into the water. Antarctica was the last official continent to be discovered. It remained completely unseen until the 1820s. But it took another 20 years to confirm it was actually a continent and not just a group of icy islands. Just because it's really cold here doesn't mean you can't go on a date here. One December night, an American scientist that was posted in Antarctica logged into a dating app simply out of curiosity. He was certain no other profiles would show up, but to his surprise, he found someone soon enough. Another researcher who was stationed just 45 minutes away, by helicopter of course. They eventually got together and went on the first date in Antarctica ever recorded. Apart from ice, this continent has something else way more abundantly than any other piece of land on Earth: meteorites. If we look at the research done by scientists, meteorites have equal chances of reaching any place on our planet. However, once they go through our atmosphere, the situation is a bit more complex. That's because different climates on our planet, like the humid ones found near the jungle, have a lot of moisture and oxygen, which will corrode most meteorites. The climate in Antarctica is really dry, so the possibility of meteorites corroding is little to none. More so, it's way easier to spot these rocks on the icy white surface of this area than in any other place on Earth. If you're not scared of the cold, you'll surely freak out when you hear about the winds here. That's because Antarctica is for the most part the windiest place on Earth. Wind speeds have been reported here to reach even 200 miles per hour.
Antarctica. It was once a green land full of dinosaurs, but now it's a frozen continent bigger than that of the US that doesn't belong to anyone. It isn't hard to find. Wherever you go, just go south until you get to the big icy thing at the south pole of our planet. It lies within the Antarctic Circle, and it's the largest single mass of ice on Earth. The continent is bigger than the US and even bigger than all of Europe. And still, Antarctica was officially discovered recently. Scientists hadn't known of its existence until 1820. After the discovery, it took another 2 decades to confirm it was a whole new continent, and a few more decades after that to decide on a name. In Antarctica, anti means the opposite, so Antarctica literally means the opposite of the Arctic. Now, even before scientists discovered the land, Ancient Greeks already theorized that there must be a southern continent to balance out the Arctic in the north. Also, some scientists who studied Polynesian artwork and oral history believe that Polynesians found the continent over a millennia before the Europeans did. Anyways, today we all know of this icy land at the South Pole. Because of its location, there are just 2 seasons there, summer and winter, and both last 6 months. In summer, it's a bit warmer, and the continent exists in pure daylight. And in winter, it's dark all day long. 98% of Antarctica is ice. This continent alone stores 60% of the planet's fresh water. And yet, despite all those water reserves, Antarctica is the biggest desert in the world. By definition, a desert is an area with sparse vegetation and little snow or rain. Notice that plenty of sand isn't a necessary condition here, even though the continent does have some sand and even sand dunes. It also gets a lot of wind. Antarctica is the windiest continent on Earth, and wind speeds can reach 200 miles per hour. That's even faster than hurricane winds. The little snow the land gets never melts. It just builds up over time, for centuries and millennia. So there's a thick ice layer there. This makes Antarctica full of hidden secrets. There's a whole new world underneath its ice. For example, there are a lot of mountains on the continent that are like 9,000 feet tall. It's taller than 3 Burj Khalifas stacked on top of each other, if we must, and that's currently the tallest skyscraper in the world. But we don't see all those mountains because they're all hidden under the ice sheet that's almost 16,000 feet thick. There's also a lake down there, beneath over 11,000 feet of snow. The lake is called Lake Vostok, named after Vostok Research Station, under which it's located. Originally, it was just a hypothesis. Over a century ago, a scientist suggested that the huge pressure created by tons of ice could decrease the melting point of ice in the lowest layers of the ice sheet, creating liquid water, which could form a lake. He didn't prove his ideas in his lifetime, but others continued his work and confirmed that this theory was true. There's also a canyon in Antarctica, hidden underneath huge masses of snow too. It's deeper than the Grand Canyon we have in Arizona. There is a mountain range that divides the continent into 2 parts, East Antarctica and West Antarctica. The western part of the continent is experiencing higher temperatures and is starting to melt. If West Antarctica melts and releases its stored water, it will raise the average global sea level by about 16 feet. That will be enough for some cities all over the world to completely disappear. Perhaps the first to turn into a water world will be Thailand's capital, Bangkok, which is just 5 feet above sea level. Then it will be Amsterdam in the Netherlands, followed by Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, Cardiff in the UK, and New Orleans in the US. People do a lot of work in Antarctica now, residing there for many months at a time to study this mystery of a continent. Over the years, even a few children were born there. But it's not a country, and the land doesn't belong to anyone. It's governed by the Antarctic Treaty System, an agreement of peaceful research and collaboration that suspends all territorial claims. It was first signed by 12 nations, and now there are 59 supporters, half of whom have decision-making powers. The continent is occupied all year round by researchers from all over the world. There are about 5,000 people living there in summer and about 1,000 in winter. Yet no one is a permanent resident there. People come and go, and the scientists take turns spending time there. The average yearly temperature there is negative 30 degrees. But there was a time when Antarctica was about as warm as Melbourne, Australia is today. It was about 40 to 50 million years ago. I wasn't around then. But the continent had green forests and dinosaurs roaming its land, chilling in the sun in a 63-degree Fahrenheit environment. That was before penguins. In our age, it's so cold that you won't even find any trees or bushes in Antarctica, just the snow. The only plants that can thrive in such extreme temperatures are lichens, moss, and algae. People can't stand such freezing conditions for lengthy periods of time either. So the continent has never had any indigenous population. Well, that is, if we don't count penguins, seals, whales, and a few other types of birds that live there now. Antarctica's fauna is the scariest and least diverse on the planet because only a few organisms can withstand its harsh conditions and because non-natives aren't allowed to be brought there. So, if you decide to travel to Antarctica with your cat, well, you can't. Hey, I don't make the rules. But those few species that live on the South Pole totally own the place. There are no more than 5,000 people there and around 20 million penguins. They are a kind of settlers, though. Penguins' first ancestors lived in Australia and New Zealand. There are still a few penguin species there, including the smallest penguin on Earth that is just 1 foot tall. Still, most of the penguins migrated to Antarctica at some point, possibly because they were attracted by the greater food supply there. It's not the cold that made them like the land. It turns out, most penguins leave the continent when the summer ends. The only ones that stay there are male emperor penguins, and they do it to warm and protect eggs left by their mates. But where do all the other penguins go? At first, it was a big mystery even to scientists. But then they attached some tiny location devices to the legs of a few of these animals and figured it out. Penguins go to live in the southern oceans while it's too cold in Antarctica. None of them go ashore for half a year until they get back to the continent. When they come back, it's when those eggs, left for male penguins to nurture, start hatching, and so penguin families can be together when it happens. Penguins eat different fish, and the ocean is full of those despite its cold temperature. In some areas, water can reach below freezing temperatures because it's salty. But fish don't freeze there because they have antifreeze proteins in their bodies. Then there are also about 1 million seals in Antarctica. They like fish too, and they can hold their breath underwater for 2 hours. They see way better underwater than in the bright light of the day, and they also use their whiskers to locate food. Their breathing holes in the ice can freeze while seals are away, and they must use their teeth to make a new one. Seals can even sleep underwater and then resurface occasionally to get some air without waking up. I can appreciate that. Consider Lake Enigma. What a fitting name. It's already strange enough because it's not even supposed to exist. But now, we stumbled upon actual life deep beneath it. And this just might help NASA in their search for life in outer space. The lake lies deep in the icy heart of Antarctica, so it's not really a water pool like we're used to, more like a lake-like block of ice, or so we thought. Just recently, Italian scientists discovered a secret that had been buried for ages, an actual body of water, and in this water, life is thriving. Various microorganisms, and even some weird little hunters, which is super weird, since Enigma sits in a remote and harsh corner of our planet, the northern Victoria Land in Antarctica. The entire South Pole is cold, but in this place, temperatures can plummet to a horrifying minus 41 degrees Fahrenheit, though on average it's around 7. Chilly. Like we said, this lake shouldn't even be there at all. Antarctica is technically the largest desert on Earth, even though it's covered in snow, because it's super dry. There are 0 rains, truly little snowfall, and the sun barely evaporates anything. And even if there is some water, the insane winds make sure to dry everything out super quickly. Putting on our thinking caps, this lake should lose an unimaginable 7 million cubic feet of water every year. Yet, the water remains. Why? No one knows. Scientists say there could be something deep underground that refills it constantly. They just have no idea what that might be. Maybe deep underground rivers, melting ice, or something else entirely. But hence the name, the Enigma Lake. The block of ice we mentioned is permanent and super thick, at least 36 feet of it, and that's higher than a 3-story building. So researchers decided to check out if there's anything beneath it. They used a so-called ground-penetrating radar, a super smart echo detector for the ground. This radar sends invisible radio waves into the Earth. When they hit something underground, like rocks, water, or anything else, they bounce back to the device. By measuring how long it takes for the signal to return and how strong they are, we can determine the distance and what exactly the radar hit. That's how animals like bats, whales, and dolphins can see underwater. And we humans stole this cool nature idea to research buried structures and hidden caves. Scientists used this device all over the Enigma surface. This way, they were able to create an entire map of this under-ice world beneath. The water itself wasn't surprising. It's the unique ecosystem in it that shocked them. Unfortunately, no secret monsters or extraterrestrial secrets this time. But there are microorganisms there that may not exist anywhere else on Earth. Somehow, these creatures have managed to survive in complete isolation and extreme cold. It's not that we don't know these microorganisms, we've met them before, just not exactly like this. There are a couple groups hanging out down there. The first one is Bacteroidota. They love breaking down complex molecules, especially in your stomach, and help digest tough plant fibers. They mostly hang out inside us, but in the outside world, we might occasionally find them in soils and oceans. Then Actinobacteriota, genius chemists among bacteria. They decompose organic materials and help the soil get healthier. They're also famous for producing antibiotics, so we owe a lot of our medicine to them. The third one is Pseudomonadota. These guys weren't a surprise. They're crazy adaptable. They can thrive pretty much anywhere, from soil to water to the human body. Some of them are good, helping plants grow and in nutrient cycles, but others can be opportunistic pathogens. Ooh, bad guys. But what is actually a surprise is that Lake Enigma has tons of Passibacteria. They're ultra small even for microorganisms and can barely do anything themselves. So they prefer to live in symbiosis or be little parasites, relying on their hosts for nutrients and other necessities. All these little chompers might be ancient. They could be remnants of a time before the lake froze over completely, which is hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's simply weird to encounter these bacteria in the Enigma Lake, especially the little parasites. Passibacteria usually love low-oxygen environments, but this lake is very oxygen-rich, not even mentioning an almost 40 feet of ice above. So all this means that even though we know who these guys are, this specific species might be new to us. They could have evolved with some unique adaptations and abilities using the lake's unusual chemistry. They probably rely on a super simple and delicate food web. Some of the microorganisms produce energy from light, well, whatever light gets down there, or the lake's chemicals. The symbiosis guys most likely survive by living on or inside their neighbors. Yep, these microscopic creatures hunt each other. Nope, things can't be peaceful even in a place like that. If we find out what their secret to survival is, we might learn more about chemistry, medicine, and even extraterrestrial life. Because if life can endure such extreme conditions, then it can probably appear pretty much anywhere, including our closest neighbors, Europa or Enceladus, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. They definitely hide oceans beneath their frozen surfaces, and now there's a very high chance there might be some life there. Antarctica must be the closest thing we have to extraterrestrial exploration before we actually land on other planets. It's full of hidden mysteries and surprising creatures. Even outside of Lake Enigma, the South Pole harbors life. Just take the McMurdo Dry Valleys, which are often referred to as Earthly Mars. These are among the most mysterious and extreme places on our planet. They're stretching across Victoria Land in Antarctica, and this is one of the driest places on Earth. Makes sense if you remember the name. Surprisingly, unlike other parts of the South Pole, this land is almost entirely devoid of snow and ice, just lots of super cold ground. There might even be some sand dunes nestled here and there between the rugged mountains. The ground is mostly covered in loose gravel, scattered with ancient rocks made of granite, and something interesting called gneiss, just spelled differently. It's the type of rock that's been through a lot, literally. It's usually born when granite and sedimentary rocks have to endure insane pressure or horrifying heat for a while, a process called metamorphism. These conditions are so intense that they literally rearrange the minerals into layers. That's why gneiss has such beautiful foliated looks. It's the planet's version of baking a layered cake. It's amazing because this place is almost exactly the way it was millions of years ago. These valleys are frozen in time, and they give us a little glimpse into Earth's distant past. And that includes life. Once again, local winds are absolutely terrifying gusts of cold air racing downhill, and they evaporate snow faster than it can even melt. So, logically, you shouldn't find much water here, not even mentioning life. But somehow, you can still stumble across frozen lakes and saline ponds in the dry valleys. And local life stretches all reason and our understanding of biology. It exists inside the rocks themselves. Microorganisms are hidden in slightly moist cracks and crevices. Deep inside, there's endolithic bacteria. These guys are super chill. Instead of moving around like other microorganisms, they always stay put inside their little rocky homes. How do they survive? Through photosynthesis. Just like plants, they take teeny tiny parts of light that gets in crevices and acts like little solar panels, getting energy from the sun. Meanwhile, in another place, beneath the Taylor Glacier, there's bacteria that literally doesn't eat anything. Not comfort, not sunlight, not even oxygen. These guys rely on a diet of dusty rocks and sulfur to fuel their weird metabolisms. By breaking down sulfur and iron, they get energy to sustain themselves. This way, they easily survive in deep seas at sub-freezing temperatures, completely cut off from sunlight, oxygen, and the world itself. This place is fascinating for both its life and the lack of it. In some parts of the valleys, like University Valley, yes, that's what it's called, the permafrost is so harsh that no microbes were found at all. This might be one of the only places on Earth where life appears to be completely absent, a quite scary idea. Anyway, now scientists are thinking about learning more about Lake Enigma and drilling this Mars-like environment. Exactly for that reason, to see how we could get samples from Mars in the future.
Look at those lush coniferous forests and tundra. What a wonderland! You may have mistakenly thought it's Canada, but it's not. It's Antarctica, about 34 million years ago. So what makes Antarctica this frigid today? It turns out a mix of dropping carbon dioxide levels and some tectonic shuffle played a huge role in transforming this ice-free paradise into the frozen continent we know now. About 50 million years ago, CO2 concentrations were sky-high, strutting around at around 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million. But as those levels tumbled down, global temps started to drop, paving the way for the mighty ice sheets that later took over Antarctica. While the CO2 dive was happening, tectonic activity was also working its magic. The big split between South America and Antarctica opened up the Drake Passage, which created the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. This powerful current acted like a bouncer, keeping warm air and ocean currents from crashing the Antarctic party, and helping keep things rather frosty. If you mix up Australia and Antarctica, you're not that wrong. These two continents used to be one. If you mix up Austria and Australia, it's much worse. By the way, don't fall for the internet myths and memes. There's no help desk in Austria specifically for people who intended to fly to Australia. Now, look at this magnificent Australian pink beach. It's precious, and not in a figurative sense. Those mysterious pinkish sands are actually garnet, and it's widely used in jewelry. Geologists studied those sands and came to the conclusion that the garnet contained there is older than local mountains. That doesn't make sense, right? In fact, it does. You see, Australia didn't used to be this very detached continent as it is now. Many millions of years ago, Australia and Antarctica were part of the supercontinent Gondwana, and glacial erosion released the garnet, which eventually made its way to the beach. These sands formed when South Australia was flat and chill, long before the mountains appeared. Most garnet gets washed away, but this batch has a rich history, tracing back to glacial rocks in the Transantarctic Mountains. So this pink sand comes from an ancient mountain range hidden under Antarctic ice. Not only does Antarctica ice hide gems like garnet, if you look harder, you might find entire buildings. Sounds insane, But this is exactly what a British explorer did. His name is Chris Brown, and he uncovered an entire building beneath the ice. He was traveling to the pole of inaccessibility, and it all started with a bummer. Chris and his son had their plane broken. Suddenly, they spotted a lone bust peeking out of the snow. This place was an old meteorological station. Despite freezing conditions, Chris and his son Micah had a blast exploring. Chris is on a mission to conquer all 7 earthbound poles of inaccessibility and has tackled 5 so far. I guess you already know that Antarctica is the largest desert on Earth, much larger than the Sahara or the Gobi. Still, despite being the driest continent on Earth, it boasts a seriously weird waterfall. Nestled in the mesmerizing McMurdo Dry Valleys, it's 5 stories tall and looks like it's gushing blood. It's even called Blood Falls. It may look outlandish and even frightening, but its nature can be easily explained. The water that creates this crimson cascade was once a salty lake, but over time, it became sealed off from the outside world when glaciers formed on top of it. Now, this ancient water hanging out 1,300 feet below the surface has cranked up its salt levels to 3 times saltier than the ocean. This salt water is also loaded with iron and gets 0 oxygen or sunlight. When the iron-rich water trickles through a crack in the glacier and meets the air, it rusts up, turning dark red. You may have mistakenly heard that no bug species belongs to Antarctica, but it's not exactly true, because there's this tiny Antarctic midge living there. Plus, there are some spiders too. Those aren't your average spiders hanging out in the darkest corners of your apartment. Those are critters lurking in the chilly darkness of the Antarctic ocean floor. These little marine creepers are actually arthropods and can stretch around 20 inches across. As if that wasn't bizarre enough, they also breathe through little holes in their legs. Quick question. What's the color that you associate most with Antarctica? I'm sure it's white. That's my association too. However, Antarctica may look like a slice of watermelon. That colorful snow comes courtesy of a tough little algae called Chlamydomonas nivalis. When things start to warm up during the Antarctic summer, these little guys release their vibrant red and green spores, painting the snow in wild and funky colors. But it's best to steer clear because that snow is not just a pretty sight. It's also toxic and definitely not edible. Searching for fossils is always a blast, but when you're in one of the most remote spots on the planet, it gets even more exciting. A diverse team of scientists recently hit the mother lode, pulling in over a ton of fossils from ancient marine life, dinosaurs, and birds from the late Cretaceous period, about 71 million years ago. Their adventure kicked off with a flight to South America, followed by a 5-day trek through the infamous Drake Passage. Upon reaching Antarctica, they set up camp using helicopters and inflatable boats. You might be thinking, why dig in Antarctica with all that ice? Well, it turns out there are places where rocks pop up, depending on the season. The team went to James Ross Island, located in the Antarctic Peninsula, and they went there during February and March. And that's one of the few parts of Antarctica where in summer, rocks are exposed, and those rocks can come from the age of dinosaurs. The expedition was a success, as they discovered over a ton of remarkable finds. Next up, the fossils will head to Chile before making their way to Pittsburgh's Carnegie Museum of Natural History. Among their discoveries, they found relics dating back about 71 million years, alongside some around 67 million years old, including plenty of snails, clams, and various marine creatures. Yikes! Look at this creepy sea worm. It could live in LA and be a star in a horror movie, but it chooses to call the chilly waters of the Southern Ocean near Antarctica its home. These worms can grow up to 8 inches long and 4 inches wide, but don't let their spooky exterior trick you. Research suggests they might actually be superheroes in disguise, playing a vital role in keeping ecosystems buzzing. Now, see that head? It's not really a head, it's just a retractable throat that helps this toothy creature chow down on its meals.
Antarctica has many creepy critters to offer. Let me introduce you to the Antarctic strawberry feather star. It's not like Patrick from SpongeBob, though. It's more like a deep-sea creature straight out of a horror movie. Picture this: 20 wiggly arms, some stretching up to 8 inches, all decked out with these bizarre little bumps. Yikes indeed. Back in 2014, scientists buried 34 seismic monitors in the snow on the Ross Ice Shelf, which is huge. Think of it as an ice slab the size of Texas, just chilling over the Southern Ocean. These clever little machines picked up a nearly non-stop buzzing. Even though our human ears usually can't catch these low-frequency sounds, scientists have worked their magic and made them audible for us. They even shared the creepy audio online. A glaciologist from the University of Chicago says that if you could hear this vibration, it'd sound like a swarm of cicadas taking over the backyard in late summer. But these glacier explorers weren't trying to capture spooky tunes. They're actually on a mission to monitor the Ross Ice Shelf because things are heating up, literally, and the ice is melting faster than ice cream on a hot day. Ice shelves are like Earth's safety plugs, keeping all that massive ice from surging into the ocean. So what exactly is making all that noise? It's likely just strong winds whipping across ice dunes, creating a kind of natural vibration.
Ooh, you're diving into the dark and icy waters of Antarctica. The eerie blue darkness is enveloping you, reminiscent of the vast expanse of open space. In these depths, where you least expect to encounter any living creature, you suddenly hear a loud, strange sound. A quacking noise, as if a giant duck was hidden in the deep. In 1960, researchers first recorded this sound and named it bioduck. Clever. For decades, they tried to unravel the mystery of its source. Was it a giant kraken? An extraterrestrial spaceship that had crashed into the ocean? A mysterious sea monster? Or perhaps an enormous duck? There were many versions, one more bizarre than the other. Oceanographers detected similar sounds in other locations as well. Off the western coast of Australia and near New Zealand, they recorded similar but higher pitch signals, which they named bio-goose. It seems the creepy atmosphere of the story disappears with such names. Anyways, these sounds were not isolated incidents. They happened multiple times with consistent intervals. Many initially thought the source must be mechanical, given the regularity of the sounds. However, studying the oceans in the latter half of the 20th century was challenging because of limited technologies. Nevertheless, scientists persisted in collecting data on bioduck and biogoose, driven by their insatiable curiosity. As more data accumulated, so did the theories. But scientists eventually uncovered the mystery. Bioduck turned out to be a form of communication with a biological origin. When researchers analyzed the repeating sounds, they noticed that the signals never overlapped. One source would speak while the others remained silent, suggesting a form of communication. The question remained, which ocean creature possessed such an extraordinary method of communicating through varied frequency sounds? The answer, as many have guessed, is whales. Scientists compared the bioduck sound from Antarctica with the calls of minke whales and found striking similarities. The biogoose sounds from the waters off Australia and New Zealand likely belong to other species or very young minke whales. This discovery, however, only deepened the mystery. What purpose did these sounds serve? Were the whales discussing their dinner plans, laughing at the humans recording their voices, or perhaps sharing deep insights about the universe? The possibilities were endless, but the most astonishing revelation was that humans might one day learn to communicate with these magnificent creatures. Communicating with whales is no longer a far-fetched idea. Scientists from the University of California have already established contact with a humpback whale named Twain. In a groundbreaking experiment, researchers conducted a 20-minute conversation with the marine mammal. Here's how they did it. The specialists went on a marine expedition to the coast of Alaska, where they recorded the sounds of a group of humpback whales. Then they played these sounds through speakers, sending the signals back into the ocean. The recorded sounds resembled a greeting, like, "Hey, what's up?" but in the whale language. These greetings are used by whales to call each other or indicate their location. Now, soon after sending the signals, the researchers received a response. Twain approached the boat, circled it, and replied with a "hey" of its own. This marked the beginning of the first ever human-whale conversation. For 20 minutes, the scientists sent 36 signals to Twain, and each time the whale responded. Moreover, it waited for time intervals before answering. That is, the team received a response from the whale, waited 10 seconds, and turned on the sound again. Researchers then waited 10 seconds and answered. It seems that Twain was a very delicate interlocutor. Maybe it was a gentleman in the whale world, who knows? Or maybe it was simply intrigued by the unusual interaction. The signals used in this communication belonged to a group of whales that included Twain. It's likely that the researchers had recorded Twain's own sounds and used them to communicate with it. In a sense, Twain was conversing with itself. Now let's continue our journey and venture into the deepest oceanic trench on Earth, the Mariana Trench. A quick reminder, the Mariana Trench is a colossal chasm in the ocean floor, stretching over 1,500 miles south of Japan and reaching a depth of nearly 36,000 feet at its deepest point. To put that into perspective, the height of the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, is like 1/10 of the Mariana Trench's depth. Now imagine this. In this deep, dark abyss, scientists recorded a strange sound. Unlike bioduct, this sound resembled something from a science fiction movie, a low rumble, followed by a metallic ping, reminiscent of the sounds made by spaceships in sci-fi movies. Researchers named this mysterious phenomenon biotwang noises. Scientists first detected this strange sound in 2014 during an acoustic survey of the Mariana Trench, and they quickly identified its source: whales, specifically Bride's whales. Using artificial intelligence, researchers analyzed around 200,000 hours of audio recordings from the ocean and found matches with a group of Bride's whales. Like other animals, these whales use sounds as a form of communication. Now, did you know what else was found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench? A plastic bottle. It's unlikely it was done by a kraken or a whale or some type of monster. Everything is simpler here. The bottle ended up there because of a human. But that's a topic for another video. Okay, let's deal with one more sound. No whales this time, just a mysterious sound in the loneliest place on Earth. This place is called Point Nemo, and that's why it's so lonely. Located in the South Pacific Ocean, Point Nemo is the most remote spot from any land. The nearest island is 1,450 nautical miles away. It's about the same long distance from land in all other directions. Moreover, here, there's almost no marine life, since few water currents reach this spot, and therefore few nutrients are supplied. In a sense, it's a water desert. And so, in 1997, oceanographers recorded a very strange and frightening sound coming from the depths in the area of Point Nemo. It was something gigantic and scary. People called it the bloop. As soon as journalists found out about this phenomenon, people around the world began to invent the most fantastic versions. The most popular of them was that the sound source was a giant sea monster, kraken, or some other creature. The hype around the bloop didn't last very long. Scientists managed to find out the nature of the mysterious noise. It turned out it belonged to an iceberg. When they crack and collapse, they create powerful ultra-low frequency sounds that can be heard from a very long distance. To confirm this version, scientists recorded the sounds of other icebergs and heard something similar to the bloop. Oh, by the way, Point Nemo is so lonely that space agencies drop out-of-service satellites here. Space objects just fall in the water. There's a 99% chance that no animal or human will be harmed by falling debris in this lonely place. That's why many people call it the satellite cemetery. But what if, someday, a spaceship from another planet falls here? What if it has already fallen in Point Nemo and sometimes emits an emergency signal that breaks through the ocean? Ooh. All the mysteries you have heard have already been solved. How about we end this video with a mystery that still baffles scientists? Meet upsweep. One of the most mysterious sounds ever recorded in the ocean. It's not just noise, it's a series of short ascending tones repeated at intervals of several seconds. It was first discovered in 1991 using hydrophones installed in the Pacific Ocean. At first, oceanographers suggested that upsweep could be associated with volcanic activity or underwater earthquakes. But the seasonal nature of the sound and its intensity change depending on the time of year, which rules out these versions. People began to consider hypotheses related to the biological life of the ocean. They studied the migration routes of marine animals and their behavior at different times of the year. However, despite all efforts, the sound source has not been identified. Some studies suggest that upsweep may be associated with certain species of fish or other marine animals that make sounds for communication or navigation, but no one has been able to prove it.
Do you know that NASA explores not only stars, planets, galaxies, or black holes? Hard to believe, but yes. The agency also works on discoveries here on our home planet Earth. So what has NASA recently discovered? Is there life under the ice? While they were analyzing data recently, they discovered something unbelievable hiding under Antarctica's ice. And this discovery not only changes everything we know about the whole water system of the Earth, but it may also help with research about life in space. Humankind's existence might depend on understanding Antarctica and its secrets. So, the recent discoveries reveal vital information about our survival. But before we continue, let's see how much you know about this place, where it's only ice as far as your eyes can see. Antarctica is one of the world's 7 continents in the southern hemisphere. It's the 5th largest continent in terms of total area, and that means it's almost twice the size of Australia. Want to see real meteorites? Go to Antarctica. Due to its dry climate, Antarctica is one of the best places to observe space. But what's even greater is that you can find meteorites on the white surface of the continent. Scientists have already plucked about 45,000 meteorites from the ice, and they think they can see another 300,000. Since there aren't many terrestrial rocks there, it's easy for them to spot them, thanks to their dark color. Antarctica's dry desert environment also helps preserve them, even the ones that fell to Earth more than 1 million years ago. And can you imagine any volcanic activity in Antarctica? It's hard. But this place is where fire meets the ice. West Antarctica is where most volcanic activity occurs. Scientists recently found that 138 volcanoes exist in West Antarctica alone. Wow! You would think that Antarctica is always cold, but no. Its coastal regions can get as warm as 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But have you ever wondered what Antarctica would look like if there were no ice? It may seem unimaginable now, but it was not always covered by ice. That was 34 million years ago, though, so nobody could tell how the continent's surface would be without the ice. But NASA changed that. They generated computer simulations and created the most accurate map of it as of today. What they saw was incredible. The continent was not flat at all like it seemed. It's pretty bumpy with valleys, rolling plains, and high mountains. But this was nothing next to what they had discovered under Antarctica's ice. So, what is it? Drum roll, please. NASA found 2 new subglacial lakes. And what's even cooler about it is that they spotted these lakes from space. How is that? If your answer is high-tech satellites, then you're right. In 2003, NASA launched a satellite called IceSat. It measured ice sheet mass balance and cloud and aerosol heights. The satellite also helped create the ice-free map of Antarctica. In 2010, the European Space Agency launched the second satellite, Cryosat-2. It was for tracking the changes in the thickness of the ice. Then, in 2018, NASA launched the third one, IceSat-2, a follow-on to the IceSat spacecraft. It measured ice sheet elevation and sea ice thickness. It was NASA's most advanced Earth-observing laser instrument. It delivered the highest precision data. And when that was combined with the data from the other satellites, it was possible to spot these two new lakes near a pair of larger ones. But how is it possible that these lakes exist in the first place? The average thickness of most Antarctica ice is approximately 1.2 miles. However, it can get over 1.8 miles thick in some places, especially during the winter. So, you might think that there's nothing under there, but science says otherwise. It's not quite possible to see it with your bare eyes, but the continent's ice is slowly but constantly flowing in different directions under the force of its weight. But scientists could not figure out how water moved for many years. That started to change in 2007, when data gathered from the IceSat provided insight into what hides beneath the surface. They first discovered an entire network of meltwater lakes connected under Antarctica's fast-flowing ice streams, and there were hundreds of them. Scripps Institution of Oceanography glaciologist Helen Amanda Fricker figured that the elevation changes measured by IceSat happened because of the dynamics of these lakes. They did not hold meltwater statically. Instead, they were filling and draining continuously over time through a system of waterways. And as they did that, the ice above rose and fell. But where do they drain? The ocean, of course, and it drains a lot. A recent study, co-authored by Fricker, found that the drainage of one lake flushed as much as 198 billion gallons into the ocean in only 3 days. Countless mysteries about how nature works are still waiting to be solved. But finding the two new lakes will give scientists a better picture of how fast the Antarctic ice sheet will change as the climate gets warmer, and how this will affect global ocean currents and sea level rise. The filling and draining cycle of the lakes also caused the ice sheet to suffer cracks and crevices. So, the information they find from these new lakes will also give them a better understanding of the damage on the surface of the ice. They will also be able to assess how this filling and draining system influences the speed at which ice slips into the oceans and seas. And that means they can evaluate how the added fresh water may alter marine ecosystems. This discovery may also suggest whether life is under the ice. Wow! Scientists drilled through about 3,504 feet of ice and found that water samples taken from one of the lakes contained approximately 10,000 bacterial cells per milliliter. Such a high number of bacterial life is a good sign, because that means the icy waters might also support higher life forms, such as microanimals, and one of these new lakes might even be their home. But the most exciting thing is that the new lakes might help them understand whether life on other planets is possible. Scientists believe any life below the frozen surface of the planet Mars might follow the patterns seen in Antarctica's lakes. So, there is a possibility that they might find critical new information on the type of life that may have existed on the red planet. You wouldn't want to be there during the winter, though. The lowest temperature on Earth you can experience is negative 128 degrees Fahrenheit. In 2010, there was an even lower temperature of negative 135 degrees Fahrenheit. And you may feel this cold much worse due to the strong and dry winds. Did you know that the size of the ice surface on Antarctica also changes throughout the year? It's about 1.2 million square miles during the summer, but when it's winter, it grows to 7.3 million square miles. Yet, despite the change, it remains the largest piece of ice on Earth. Sorry, Arctic, you lose. Do you know these cute little penguins? Consider these animals the locals because there is no native population in Antarctica. It's a no man's land because no single country owns it. But do you know who really owns it? 5 different species of penguins, seals, and killer whales. Aha. Despite the continent's harsh conditions, you can visit it as a tourist for fishing and research purposes. Around 5,000 people reside on the continent during summer at research stations. But when winter comes, the number naturally drops down to 1,000. Antarctica's ice blanket makes up 70% of the world's freshwater reserves. Imagine what would happen if it melted. The global sea levels would be raised by almost 200 feet.